And welcome to the August 23rd, 2022 regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission.
State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates.
If you wish to address the Planning Commission this evening, please come forward at the appropriate time to the lectern when recognized, and clearly print your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt the meeting, please either switch it to the silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I'll ask our Planning Commission recording secretary, Kathy Zarnecki, to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Briegner, Mr. Faison.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Ms. Malala-Hali.
Here.
Ms. Barakis.
Here.
Mr. Rahman. Mr. Tagle.
Here.
Quorum present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda for this evening's meeting. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda? Mr. Krent makes the motion to approve. Mr. Tagle is seconded. Any changes to the agenda or corrections? If not, we'll have a roll call.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Hali.
Yes.
Ms. Barakis.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is approval of minutes from the August 9th meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Ms. Malala-Hali, do you want to make that motion since I skipped over you last time? So.
Sure, thanks.
And then who would someone second? Ms. Barakis seconds it. Any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Hali.
Yes.
Ms. Barakis.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is a public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that would like to make a comment on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, then we will move right into our study item, a potential rezoning and preliminary site plan. This is Elevate Mixed-Use Development at the southeast corner of Big Beaver and Todd. The address being 1985 West Big Beaver and 1936 Butterfield, 1787 West Big Beaver, and the PIN is 88-20-29-226-020, Section 29, currently zoned BB, which is Big Beaver, also zoned P for parking, and R1C, one family residential zoning districts. And I assume Mr. Carlisle will be doing the presentation.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have a pretty brief presentation tonight to give. So the project in front of you is a proposed redevelopment of existing site at 1985 Big Beaver. It's the southeast corner of Big Beaver and Todd Drive. We note there's an existing 34,000 square foot building at the hard corner. That will remain on site and it will not be demolished. The building that will be demolished is that small little building just to the east of the proposed building. So this is a building that will be demolished. This building will be preserved as part of the redevelopment. In total, the application is 5 parcels. All 5 parcels will be consolidated into one parcel if this moves forward. So the site plan in front of you, it's rotated, just for reference, it's rotated from what the aerial saw. So north is actually this way. So this is Big Beaver, this is Todd Drive, this is the existing building that will remain. The applicant is proposing a 5-story mixed-use building that essentially wraps around the existing building. Within that 5-story building is a 7,000 square foot restaurant, which will be located on the front portion right adjacent to Big Beaver. And then moving back is a 70-unit apartment building. The first floor of the restaurant, which is located, again, right in this, is physically separated from the first floor of the apartment building. It's connected to the second story, and underneath that second story overhang is a drop-off valet parking area and some limited parking. But again, the building is physically not separated in the first floor at that location. Parking for the development includes a combination of first floor and second floor parking that's covered. It's located in this general location of the proposed apartment building. And then there is at-grade parking here off of Todd and off of this back end at Butterfield. In total, the site with the combination of uses requires 325 spaces. The applicant is requesting relief for a mixed-use project to only provide less than that, so 54 spaces less than the 325 spaces. Access to the site will be one point off Butterfield in the rear of the site, as well as 3 accesses off Todd Drive and 1 main access off of Big Beaver. The amenities, as noted by the applicant, include a mixed-use development, a restaurant with rooftop dining. Within the restaurant/apartment building will be a banquet facility. The apartment will include a workout facility. The apartment will also include a rooftop and pool, as well as co-working space. This is the elevation of the building as it fronts on Big Beaver. So again, the restaurant is located in the front end, and then the Elevate apartment complex, you can see, is behind the proposed restaurant. The zoning is a mix of different zoning districts. It includes Big Beaver form-based, which is that front part that fronts on Big Beaver. There's the parking in the zone parking in the rear, and then R1C is this little corner down here. We note that the application does not include this office zone parcel. It's kind of the donut around the rest of the development, and so we do consider what and if happens to that potential site if the site if that were to go away or be assumed by this development. The applicant is seeking a rezoning. What has not been clear to us or verified by the applicant is, are they seeking a rezoning in the form-based district for the entire site, or are they seeking a plan unit development? So that should be a point of discussion with the applicant in terms of what classification that they're seeking. We also note that, again, the office parcel is not part of this application. It would not be considered as part of the rezoning if this moves forward. We spent a lot of time, the Planning Commission, discussing the Big Beaver master plan and the intended vision of that corridor. The key concepts found in the Big Beaver corridor study, the master plan, is promotion, redevelopment, opportunities along the Big Beaver corridor, promote redevelopment with a greater mix of land uses, particularly new residential uses, transform the Big Beaver corridor into a people place with around-the-clock uses, and lastly, transform the corridor into a pedestrian-friendly place. We find because of this mixed-use element and the residential portion of the development is consistent with the master plan, as the city does seek to bring additional high-density residential units along the Big Beaver corridor. Mr. Chairman, we don't have a recommendation, obviously, because this is only in concept phase, but we are asking the Planning Commission, when you consider the application, to consider some of these points. First, do you find that the plan is consistent with the city's master plan? 2, does the Planning Commission support the proposed mix of uses and housing types, and/or are there additional types or changes in the types of housing that the Planning Commission thinks should be considered? 3, is there a concern about the future of the remaining O parcel that is not part of the application? 4, are there site plan changes the applicant should consider? 5, are there other on-site amenities that the applicant should consider? And lastly, are there other considerations that should be discussed with the applicant? So, Mr. Chairman, open to any questions from the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle? Yes, Ms. Parakis.
Yeah, I did have a question when we talked about, if they come in and ask for a rezoning of the area and that it's not going to include the O, the office, are they able, I'm just curious, if they were to approach the owner of that property and say, hey, do you want to come in on this with us and let's do it, and then that way, if and when you do decide to sell, it's rezoned with us? Is that something that can happen?
Certainly, they can partner, for lack of a better term, with the owner of the O parcel and get that rezoned, even if the O parcel is not part of this particular development, and kind of primes the pump or sets it up for a future redevelopment of that parcel if it moves forward. Because honestly, the Big Beaver zoning there is more in line with the master plan than what the current O zoning is, but it's not, again, it's not part of this application. We can't force the current owner of the O to be part of the application, but certainly it would be something that we would be open to considering if it were to be included in the future, even if it wasn't going to be redeveloped as part of this particular development. It would allow, but it would perhaps allow the applicant to plan for that parcel if it should flip over to do something with that to incorporate as part of this development.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Faison.
A couple of questions on the parking. Could you go to maybe the second one you showed? Yeah, that
This one? Or the parking?
No, that one there. And I was curious where the covered.
So, let me just outline the building a little better here. So, where's my dot? Okay. So, this essentially is basically the restaurant portion, the banquet facility, the portion. This is first and second story. This is the second story that attaches to the apartment building. The apartment building essentially is this green block, essentially. And the first and part of the second story of the green covered, of the first floor of the apartment building, that's the covered parking that I mentioned in the slide.
So the building goes all the way to the back?
Yep.
By the pink?
This
So the two shades of green?
That's the building. That's the apartment building.
Okay.
The yellow is at-grade parking.
Right.
The red is at-grade parking. But the building itself is this kind of green block here for the apartment, and then again, this is the apartment, or the restaurant portion of the site.
And any meaning to the darker shade of green there in the middle? Is that a different?
I think that's a second-story parking, covered parking.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is like, this view is almost if it's the building see-through, and you're looking down and seeing this is the first story of a multi-story building with the units above the first floor of parking.
I understand now. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle? I just had one quick question, and I'm sure the petitioner will be able to give us more information, but looking at this, both, I guess, Mr. Carlisle and Mr. Savident, from a parking point of view, how is this going to be parked? For example, if there's going to be a banquet room, obviously they'll be bringing more people in. Is there enough parking on the site?
So right now, this is very preliminary. They have not given us a parking study. This is really the only plan we've got. It's just really a high-level site plan. Obviously, if this moves forward, they would have to provide a parking study that would be reviewed by the city as well as the city's consultant, OHM, to confirm if parking is sufficient or not. That being said, what we are hearing from many of the applicants that come in for multifamily residential is that based on their uses in other facilities, usually every unit they're parking about at 1.5 rather than the 2 that we require. So they're actually finding that we're, by ordinance, are overparked. And that's reflected in the parking site that they give the city to consider. So, Mr. Lambert, it's a great question. It's one we don't have an answer for right now. It would have to be vetted by a future parking study provided by the applicant.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, Mr. Krent.
Just to follow up on the parking, so what area is the shared parking?
So my understanding is the whole site is shared parking.
Oh,
So
shared
between the restaurant site, the existing buildings on site, and the future apartment building.
Okay.
So in totality, all uses on site, including the existing building, requires 325 spaces by our ordinance. They're asking for a deviation to have 54 spaces less than that 325.
Got it, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have a quick
Yeah,
question.
go ahead, Ms. Malala.
So the restaurant parking, I do see the valet entrance there, but the restaurant parking, is it going to be in those shaded areas, the yellow and the pink? Is that the restaurant parking? So
That's my understanding, and the apartment dedicated use would be the parking in the building.
in the building, right. So there is some amount of walking that somebody will be doing from the pink area to the restaurant.
If they don't valet it, yes. And so one of the points of discussion would be how do you safely traverse from the pink portion to the restaurant? Could you go through part of the apartment building? Is there a dedicated sidewalk? Again, this is very high level at this point. There's not been a landscape plan submitted with this, so it's tough for us to tell at this point and to be able to answer those questions.
Sure. Thank you, appreciate it.
Mr. Savident, did you have something to mention?
I was going to introduce the team
Okay.
who's before us this evening.
Okay.
The owner is here representing the ownership. The ownership is Jason Hamama to the right. And then representing this architectural team from Design House is Peter Stuhlreiler and Mike Pizzoli.
Great. Well, if one of you wants to come up, or all three of you want to come up now to answer any questions members of the commission might have, and just to remind you to, I think some of you have been here before, is to go ahead and sign in and then introduce yourself to us.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Peter Stuhlreiler with Design House Architecture. I am the chief architect and designer for the company. Our address is 3300 Auburn Road, and like Brent said, we're here with the team to just kind of crack the egg and talk about this project on a really high level.
Good evening, Jason Hamama. I'm the developer with Encore Development.
Okay, great. Welcome. Any members of the commission have questions at this time or any input? Go ahead, Ms. Parakis.
Yeah, hi, thank you for being here. My initial reaction to the project is I really like it a lot. I think it's innovative, I think it's interesting, unique. I think it responds to the master plan, what we've been asking for. It's something exciting and will bring people, so I really like it. Could you maybe talk to us a little bit, could we put the picture up of the elevation? Because when it was just described to us.
That one?
Yeah, so I understand that it wraps around, but then Mr. Carlisle said that where what I thought was in the back going to be that long stretch, I thought it was going to be parking garage, and he made it sound like it was going to be more apartments, but this I can't see from this rendering. So could you confirm that the apartments go all the way sort of like parallel to Todd?
Well, I can't confirm it because we're in the early stages.
Yeah.
I like to talk to administration and planning commissions to get the input, the processes, the PUDs, the rezones, and the answer to that question has to do with the zoning process. Okay. So if we were to BB the whole site and this kind of, this whole district together, I mean, it's already partly, but the Diamonds Direct and the Benihana and this restaurant and these apartments together, then that back leg certainly would be apartments. Okay. Should we be able to park them? But certainly, and if we weren't rezoning, because that's a parking district today, then that back leg would be parking. So this is all part of the, I mean, we get stuck and we want to say, you know, we need your input to talk about that because it makes sense that it's apartments, but depends on the process.
Mr. Krent.
Yeah. Is this the plan that you would like to see as a starting point, as opposed to, well, we just made it work? Or, I'm trying to figure out, would you prefer that apartment going all the way back parallel to Todd?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought, but I just want to verify because you kind of left a little bit vague there.
I just want to get a feel for where the zoning and the process go. Putting the BB over the whole thing is a lot different than on bits and pieces.
Yeah, to follow up on that, so are you going to pursue a PUD or leave it Big Beaver District?
Again, probably the number one reason we're here is to talk about this and to get opinions on how this goes. And I think after a couple of discussions, I think rezoning to BB is probably the smoothest thing that we could do. And then negotiating the shared parking and the rest of the conditions.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Ms. Malalahari.
Thank you for being here, and I like the wraparound idea. It is very cool. I think you captured something awesome here. This is something that I'm sure all our Troy residents would be very happy to see. It's different, it's eye-catching, and if this is the elevation that we are going to ultimately be given, then yes, it's a beautiful design. My only question is in regards to the office building that currently sits. Have you had any discussion with the owners of that area? Are they willing to come on board with you? Because what I see here, they are sandwiched between two parking lots, essentially. It's a bad sandwich situation here. But I don't know what they are thinking, and I don't know what conversations you have had, but is there any potential for them to be part of your plan here?
So I've owned the property for probably approaching 4 years now. Every so often I go and talk to them. So they've been there for, I think, almost 50 years. I think he's just waiting till they retire. So I don't think he wants to do anything now until like he's ready to sell the building. So we don't know when that is. So we would love to tie it into this whole development somehow, some way, but.
Yes.
One thing that and Mr. Savin is raising his hand, he might want to make the same suggestion that I'm about to, is that approaching him about being part of the rezoning, even though he doesn't have to change ownership, but eventually it might in fact give him more profitability for the property when he decides to eventually sell it. So I don't know if that's what you were suggesting, Mr. Savin.
That was one of the things I was going to bring up.
Was there anything else you wanted to mention?
I'll let him talk to that,
Okay.
speak to that first.
Okay. So would you be amenable to talking to him about including in the rezoning process?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Nice guy, but he's very difficult to even get a hold of. So, I mean, a lot of times when I reach out to him, I won't hear back for a month at a time. So definitely something I can approach him with. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he may just not want to talk to you because he's afraid, he just wants to buy the property. But if, talking to him about being part of the rezoning and to his benefit eventually, so.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be the challenge, is to
I
convince
know.
the gentleman that this is to his benefit.
Yeah.
And I look at it from my standpoint. So if I'm like sitting on the other side, somebody approaches me, hey, let's rezone this thing, and somebody that's not really in the business, doesn't know what's going on, he might think like, hey, what are they trying to do? What are they up to? So, yeah.
Conspiracies.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Any other questions from members of the commission or any comments? Mr. Savin, go ahead.
I guess if you did have to have a conversation about rezoning and whether the owner participates or not, and you want us to participate, to kind of, fact check what, just to be a kind of a neutral party and, in terms of what the ramifications are of rezoning, if he doesn't want to make any changes to his property, et cetera, we're happy to do that. But my question earlier is along the lines of, so you got the donut hole here, and we want to be respectful of the ownership rights of that person. It's been there a long time, and want to be respectful of that. But in the event that, potentially, you're able in the future to, this proceeds as shown in the concept, and you're able to at some point pick up this parcel, and I know you've thought 1, 2, 3, 4 steps ahead. What could you do with this piece given what you've shown in terms of a concept?
Well, geometrically speaking, we can get a drive aisle, a setback, and a 62-foot wide building on that finger of space coming back. That property doesn't do us a ton of good. I mean, when you really think about it, we moved the building over a little bit, but we can't fatten the building. It's not an office building. It has a certain dimension. It has to be in width. So it's not a deal. We wouldn't even be here if that building was a deal breaker. I mean, somebody would be cutting this guy a check, but I don't think right now it's not a willing participant.
But I guess my question is, in theory, you could do something with that piece if it's made available to improve the overall, Todd Street and.
From landscape's perspective, it becomes the parking gets a little closer. The retention might go surface instead of underground. Yeah, so there's definitely, when you put that in the mix, things change. I don't know. The objective here is to get somewhere between 70 and 100 apartment units on this site, along with a commercial activity along Big Beaver. It's not a deal breaker, but yes, it changes things a little. But does it change things enough? I don't know the guy once. I'm not going to say it in a public forum, but it doesn't change enough for the money to make sense at this point. economically.
And as Peter said, like what we're trying to achieve here, I know there's a ton of apartments coming, up and down Big Beaver. We're trying to achieve like a different feel, more of like a boutique kind of development, only being say 70 units, 2-3 restaurants right in front, office, apartments, so like a nice mix.
Any other comments from members of the commission? Mr. Faison.
So there was a question earlier about that parking lot to the rear of the site, and then people potentially walking to the restaurant. Now, how do you envision pedestrians using that parking lot?
Certainly, we provide a 5-foot sidewalk so that people wouldn't be walking in the road. But ideally, the way that the site plan works, and if you could put that up, Brent, the kind of, what broke the ice for the site plan was to get that cul-de-sac valet area onto the site, because now Benihana's gets it, the new restaurant gets it, and we can encourage people, like at Eddie V's or somewhere else, to valet. And had they not valeted, remember, the yellow spaces on that drawing would be alternating hours with the restaurants in terms of their peak times. So the yellow spaces might be self-park because the office and the Diamond place is not during the same peak hours as the restaurant. So it kind of all works, and we think valet probably works, and ride sharing and everything else that was all of a sudden going to be here, but COVID stopped it. But maybe that comes back too. So, and as well, the dark green was also, I believe, not fully dedicated to the apartments. It was the light green 2-level parking platform that was fully dedicated to the apartments. So we had a little bit of room for self-parking people. That wouldn't, so in other words, to answer your question, am I going way back in the loop? To answer your question, really wouldn't have a lot of self-parking restaurant people in the pink lot at the end.
And then just a follow-up question. So the parking in the building, there's 2 stories of parking throughout the entire apartment building?
No, the dark green is a single level of parking at grade under the building, and the light green is grade level and a platform on top of that.
And apartments on top of that?
Ideally, when we go back to the drawing board with this input about how we're going to approach, ideally we would put apartments on top of that as well, right?
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify one other point that came up, I'm sorry to interrupt. The discussion of banquet, I think it was a note on the drawings of banquet. The banquet room was a apartment amenity. It was an assembly space for the people in the apartment to come and use, and then have the restaurant cater back to it if they were having a party or something. It was not a public banquet facility.
Yeah, maybe more of like a clubhouse for the apartment.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Parakis.
So when you bring it back, I guess, with more detail, I would like to see how maybe a vision of what would happen if you ultimately get that missing parcel. Like, I don't know if maybe you would swing the apartments around and sort of complete the zigzag and then move that parking closer in the middle or something. I mean, just something to sort of give us an idea. And then I guess as an overall comment, I would say that I am a little bit concerned about the parking not being enough. I don't know if you would consider going up a level on the 2-story, making it 3-story, and then building the apartments above that if it's needed.
To that point, if we go BB and we can stretch the multifamily back, certainly.
You would need to.
Certainly drive right through it, the whole thing, right. We wouldn't need it, but we would be able to put it there.
Okay.
Also, so then we could alleviate.
And one other thought, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, but have you given any consideration to doing any, talking about true mixed use in those buildings, maybe the first floor being other things, retail, other amenities that would be for the public, but also helpful to the people living in that little community? as opposed to parking on the first floor if we allow you to build up and you would put retail down there. I don't know. Have you thought of it?
Well, the way I've thought about the other parcel, when we're trying to create this district here with the Benihana Diamonds office, secondary restaurant, apartments, that other parcel would be the ideal spot for another use that was kind of commensurate with this area, with this district. So, spa, I don't know.
Yeah, like
I mean,
something maybe that doesn't need that like street presence on Big
Yeah,
Beaver.
you're a little remote.
At least like you'll be on Todd Road versus somewhere, in between the apartments.
Right.
Parking.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Right.
just from like a leasable standpoint, and obviously the success of any tenant that goes in there.
Right, correct. Okay. Thanks.
Ms. Malal-Holly?
One quick clarification, and I know this is all concept, but since you clarified the banquet, that was one of my questions, so thank you for clarifying that. The co-work space, is it something that's, is it like a WeWork kind of a space, or is it just
No,
for
it's
the?
just for part of the apartment.
Okay, got it.
It's just for the apartment. Anybody that lives there wants to go get some work done, some workstations.
Yeah, that would be-
When we're in these stages, we're looking at investors, we're looking at building code, we're looking at planning and zoning code. So a lot of these phrases and words we use are hitting on apartment developer, what amenities do you want in your apartment, and then you list banquet and co-working and everything else. And then zoning sees it, and they say, well, we got to park it, we got to do this, and it's got to be a second business. So it does get a little bit fuzzy in the very early phases. But that's why we're here, we just talk it all out. But yeah, it's not a WeWork.
No, I just was thinking,
Yeah.
how is that going?
I don't blame you, because when you
But-
first see it, it says co-working space, banquet, okay, where are you going to put all of this?
Yeah, but the concept as it is, like how you're thinking in terms of the fact that some of the people who are living in studio apartments may need some extra space to maybe have a conference call or take a quick sensitive call or whatever, that space is nice. It's a newer way of thinking and using that space. I personally like it.
Any other comments or questions? I'm just saying, I agree with what my colleagues have said. I think it will be a nice addition to the Big Beaver corridor, especially getting a nice restaurant out there. I'm glad to see that you're going to use the outdoor amenities. Hopefully, 8 months out of the year, people will be able to use one way or another, and all make it friendly to pedestrians, and the apartments being on Big Beaver, I think is a plus for it too. So, I guess Mr. Savinin, it sounded like they were looking more at BB for the site. So is that something you would talk with them about to see which was the best way they wanted to proceed?
Well, ultimately, it's their decision, but the positive is that Big Beaver affords a lot of flexibility and allows for mixed use and allows for some height and a lot of the things that we're talking about. So it sounds like I didn't hear anyone on the Planning Commission object to the potential of rezoning, the balance of the site to Big Beaver, which is good. I heard parking. We want to make sure we get the parking right. We had a conversation before the meeting. We don't want it overparked, but we don't want it underparked. We want it right parked. So that's a challenge, but not insurmountable by any means. And I didn't hear anyone, buckle at the notion of going, of pulling that apartment or the residential unit further to the south. So, is there any feedback that we haven't provided that you wanted clarification on?
No, that's it. I mean, I want clarification that a rezone to BB fits the master plan for the site front to back. That's what I would like.
Great.
It sounds like based on the comments of the Planning Commission that they support that they believe that the rezoning the Big Beaver is supported by the master plan. And I also heard that anything you can do to encourage the owner of the office zoning district to participate in a potential rezoning would be a good thing.
And then you're going to expedite that.
He'll be your answer man. Yes, Ms. Parakis.
I do have a question about that. So I know with the PUD, we enter into a negotiation and they pretty much say what they're going to do and we agree on, with city council. But if we just do a rezoning to the Big Beaver, district, they could come back with, a 10-foot story. They could come back with something completely different. I mean, of course, it still needs to get approved, but this could go away and it could be something completely different. So then I would start worrying about, if you guys all remember that little corner up there, that's the, I believe I'm right, that's the, I don't remember if they're townhomes or condominiums, but it's the Regent Park thing across the street. So now all of a sudden, you could have something going up 8 stories and right on top of those residences. So maybe I am a little bit worried about a blanket rezoning to BB.
So this is where the team here listens to the comments, and they do have the right to voluntarily submit for a conditional rezoning, and including a site plan that they would agree to be bound by. They could voluntarily submit that. We're not obligating them in any way because it's got to be voluntarily, but.
And you're saying conditional rezoning as opposed to a PUD?
Yes, so that there's more predictability.
Okay.
So like you said, it's a blanket rezoning to BB, but we're really not sure what they're going to, they have the right to submit anything that complies.
Right.
But if they were to voluntarily submit that, they would, potentially agree to certain conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm not trying to lead the horse to water here. That's strictly voluntarily on their part. How did I do there, Julie? I said voluntary 10 times, so.
Yes, sir.
If I can say one thing, and it's completely understandable your thoughts. From a developer standpoint, it would never make sense on paper to really go any bigger, Peter, with all that additional parking and 10 stories.
But if you went away and it was already rezoned, is the
Correct.
point.
That's
Is
what-
it now you're gone and somebody else
Yep.
comes in and uses BB to go crazy. And the voluntary option for rezone is still BB. So the only conditions that apply are what we volunteer.
That's correct.
But all the rest of the conditions are by right BB.
Yeah, if you were to decide to submit a PUD is a negotiated process where a role of the Planning Commission is to actually negotiate. With a conditional rezoning, we're not allowed to negotiate. It's got to be voluntarily offered. So it's a significant difference.
But yeah, and I'm not looking at, if there's an option to give us the rights to do the uses and the setbacks and the heights that we're looking for today, the BB, even if we did conditionally volunteer to limit the height to a number, then that easily is the more fluid process. So, then the BB.
Any other questions or input? Right, if you have everything you need from us, we appreciate you coming and talking to us and look forward to the next phase of the proposal coming back. Great. Thank you.
Thanks for the discussion.
You're welcome. I would invite any of the public that wanted to come up and speak now, but there's no other members of the public here, so I guess we don't need to open it up for comment at this point in time. All right, next on the agenda is a resolution to cancel the October 11th, 2022 regular meeting. Mr. Sabaton, do you want to explain for the public, because I know all the commissioners have received the information why we need to do this, but.
Yeah, we have Mr. Krent to thank for this. He was more on the ball than I was, as usual. So we have 3 members that are going to attend the Michigan Association of Planning Conference members, Krent, Faison, and Buechner. So 3 members, which, if we were to have a meeting, would give us only 6 members present, and myself and Mr. Carlisle are also going to participate. The challenge is the conference this year is on Mackinac Island, and it's in the fall, and the ferry schedule becomes more limited. It starts Wednesday morning, but that limited ferry schedule, I think the latest ferry is Tuesday night at 6 o'clock, and the earliest I think is 10 o'clock in the morning or so. I forget the times, but it basically makes it impossible for any of us to attend all of the conference, and we're going to be running late because of scheduling and et cetera. So it makes sense. We also don't want to put any applicants kind of behind the 8 ball, because you need 5 votes and with only 6 members potentially attending. So it made sense to consider a cancellation of that meeting.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to cancel the October 11th meeting? Mr. Krent makes the motion. Is there a second? Ms. Malala seconds it. Any discussion? Seeing none, we are ready for the roll call.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. That motion passes, and the October 11th meeting is canceled. Now we have public comment for items on the agenda, and once again, there's nobody left in the audience, so we can pass by that. And we will go around for, I guess, comments from members of the commission. I didn't see that listed on the agenda, but I think we normally do that. So, Mrs. Zarnicki, would you have anything you'd like to share with the commission?
I don't, Mr. Chair. Thank
Okay.
you.
Mr. Hudson?
I don't either.
Mr. Faison?
Nothing for me.
Krent? Parakis?
Nothing, thanks.
Malauhai?
Nothing, thanks.
Ms. Tagle? Mr. Dufresne? Mr. Savedon?
No.
Mr. Carlisle? With that, we are adjourned. I'm sorry it took 40 minutes. So we didn't meet Mr. Savedon's goal that would require me to be impeached from office. With that, we are adjourned.